My dear brothers and sisters, there comes a time in every believer's life when the road becomes lonely, when the voices that once surrounded you grow silent, when the friends who walked beside you no longer understand your journey. There comes a point in every believer's journey when the noise of the world begins to fade, and suddenly you realize you are walking a path few understand. You look around and the people who once stood beside you are no longer there. The ones who said they would never leave have drifted away. You pray, but heaven seems quiet. You wait for encouragement, but the silence grows louder. You ask yourself, Lord, why am I walking this road alone? And it is in that very moment that heaven whispers, because you are chosen. When God places his hand on your life, he begins to separate you from what is ordinary, not because he wants to hurt you, but because he is preparing you for something sacred. The road to purpose is not paved with crowds and comfort. It is carved through silence, tears, and long nights of faith. The chosen ones are never called to blend in. They are called to stand apart. And standing apart often means walking alone. Abraham was told to leave his father's house and go to a land he did not know. He walked with nothing but a promise. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God ever used him to deliver a nation. David was anointed king, yet he found himself hiding in caves, running for his life. Even the Savior himself walked alone into the desert to fast and pray before his ministry began. Solitude is not the absence of God's presence. It is often the proof of it. When everyone else disappears, God remains, shaping your heart in the shadows, refining your spirit when no one is watching. Loneliness has a purpose. It is the classroom of the chosen. It teaches you to depend not on applause, but on anointing. It teaches you to hear God's voice above every other. When you are surrounded by people, their voices can drown out his. But when you walk alone, his whisper becomes unmistakably clear. The silence you fear is often the space where your calling is formed. You see, before God can trust you with influence, he must test you with isolation. The greater the destiny, the deeper the solitude. Just as gold must endure fire to reveal its true value, your spirit must endure seasons of aloneness to reveal its true strength. You cannot carry divine purpose with a heart that still depends on human validation. God removes people not to punish you, but to protect what he is planting inside you. Some people cannot go where you are going. They are not equipped for the weight you are called to carry. So he allows them to drift away, so your focus can remain on him. And while you walk through that season, you may not see it, but heaven is busy. God is arranging the next chapter of your life, aligning opportunities, preparing hearts, and opening doors that no human could ever open. You are not forgotten. You are being refined. You are not abandoned. You are being prepared. You are not walking alone. You are walking with God in disguise. So do not despise the silence. Do not curse the loneliness. The same path that feels empty today will one day be the road that leads to your destiny. And when the season shifts and you stand in the place of fulfillment, you will look back and realize that every lonely night, every tear, every unanswered prayer was not a sign of God's absence, but a mark of his preparation. The chosen ones walk alone, not because God has left them, but because he is walking with them so closely that there is no room for anyone else. The path of the chosen is narrow, but it leads to glory. So hold on, keep walking, and remember this: your loneliness is not a curse, it's the birthplace of your calling. When God sets you apart, he often places you in a season that feels like fire. Everything familiar begins to fall away. The people you once leaned on seem distant. The plans you made no longer work. The doors you expected to open stay shut. and you stand there wondering, why is everything changing? Why does it feel like everything I knew is being stripped away? My friend, it is not destruction. It is divine refinement. God has chosen to refine you in the fire of isolation. When gold is refined, it cannot be purified in a crowd of metals. It must be placed alone in the furnace, where the heat is intense and the flames are close. Every impurity rises to the surface, not to destroy it, but to reveal its true worth. That is exactly what God does with the chosen ones. He allows the heat to increase, not because He wants to harm you, but because He is drawing out everything in you that cannot stay in the next season. He is removing doubt, pride, fear, dependency, and distraction. The pain you feel is not punishment, it is purification. In that isolation, you begin to see yourself differently. You realize that your strength was never truly tested until you were forced to stand alone. You discover that your faith was never truly faith until you had no one else to depend on but God. And you come to understand that some lessons can only be learned in silence, some growth can only happen in solitude, and some victories can only be won when no one else is watching. There is a divine mystery in how God works. He hides His most powerful servants in places no one looks. He allows their value to be shaped in obscurity. Because before God reveals a vessel, He first refines it. Before He gives you a platform, He gives you private pain. Before He blesses your public life, He strengthens your private foundation. Many want the glory of being chosen, but few are willing to endure the loneliness that shapes the chosen. So when you find yourself in that fire, do not fight it. Do not try to escape the process. The fire is your friend. It is teaching you what comfort never could. It is showing you who you are without the applause, without the affirmation, without the support of others. It is in that solitude that your faith is made unshakable. Your prayer life becomes deeper, and your relationship with God becomes real. You start to realize that everything you lost in the fire was never meant to remain. Only what is pure, what is strong, what is divine will survive. And here's the beautiful truth. God never leaves you in the fire alone. Just like the 3 Hebrew men in Babylon, when they were thrown into the flames, a 4th figure appeared beside them, one like the Son of God. That's the same presence that walks beside you now. You may not see Him, but He is there. You may not hear Him, but He is speaking through your endurance. You may not feel Him, but He is strengthening you with every tear, every trial, every silent night. When the fire has finished its work, you will come out shining with a glory you never knew before. You will be stronger, purer, and more aligned with God's purpose. The isolation that once felt unbearable will reveal itself as the most sacred season of your life, the season where heaven shaped you into who you were always meant to become. So don't despise your refining fire. Don't curse your isolation. It is not the end of you. It is the making of you. And when you step out of that fire, the world will see not what you've lost, but what God has forged within you. You will shine with a brilliance that could only come from being chosen and refined by the hand of God Himself. There are seasons in life when it feels as if heaven has gone silent. You pray, and nothing moves. You cry out, but there seems to be no answer. You wonder if God has forgotten you, if He has turned His face away. Days turn into weeks, weeks into months, and still nothing seems to change. Yet what you cannot see in those moments is that the hand of God is never still. He is moving, arranging, shifting, and aligning things in ways that the human eye cannot perceive. His silence is not absence, it is strategy. His delay is not denial, it is divine timing. God works in hidden places. He is a God who loves to prepare in secret. When the seed is planted beneath the soil, it disappears from sight, but it is not dead. It is growing unseen, taking root in darkness. The same is true for you. You may feel buried, but you are only being planted. The soil of obscurity is where God allows your roots to grow deep enough to hold the weight of the blessing that is coming. If He were to reveal you too soon, the wind of pride or the storm of adversity could uproot you. So He hides you not to withhold from you, but to prepare you for what He has already ordained. Many people confuse delay with rejection, but the chosen ones learn that delay is God's greatest protection. Sometimes He closes a door you were praying to enter, because what waits behind it would have broken you. Sometimes He removes relationships you were desperate to keep, because those very people could not handle the version of you He is building. And sometimes He allows silence, because if He answered too soon, you would settle for less than what He intended. God's hidden hand works best when we stop trying to control what only He can command. In the hidden season, faith becomes your anchor. You cannot see what God is doing, but you must trust that He is doing something. You must believe that the same God who led you into this wilderness is also the one who will lead you out. He is the architect of your destiny, and architects do their finest work in silence. The builder may not see the design, but the blueprint is already complete. Every heartbreak, every delay, every tear is a piece of a divine pattern that will one day make perfect sense. And when the time is right, God will lift the curtain. He will take what was hidden and make it visible. The people who once overlooked you will stand in awe of what He has done. You won't need to explain yourself, defend yourself, or prove yourself. Your transformation will speak louder than your words ever could. The very silence that once made you question God will become the evidence of His careful preparation. The very waiting that once broke your heart will become the foundation of your strength. Do not underestimate the hidden seasons, for they are holy. They are the places where God shapes your character, matures your spirit, and fills you with the endurance needed to carry His promise. What He does in private, He will one day display in public, but He will only reveal you. When revealing, you will bring Him glory and not destroy you. So trust His timing even when it feels slow. Trust His silence even when it feels heavy. Trust His plan even when it makes no sense. Because behind every quiet moment, behind every unanswered prayer, behind every closed door, there is a hidden hand writing a greater story. And one day, when the story unfolds, you will look back and realize that the silence was sacred, the waiting was necessary, and the hidden hand of God was never withholding anything from you. It was leading you, protecting you, and preparing you for everything He promised you would become. There is a sacred misunderstanding that often troubles the hearts of God's chosen ones. When they begin to walk alone, they assume that aloneness means abandonment. They feel as if heaven has withdrawn, as if the path ahead has been stripped of divine company. Yet the truth is far more beautiful and mysterious, because even when you walk alone, you are never truly alone. The silence may surround you, the road may seem empty, but the unseen presence of God walks with you step by step, breath by breath, moment by moment. You may not see Him, but He is there. You may not feel Him, but He is closer than your next heartbeat. The chosen walk a narrow path. It is not wide enough for crowds, nor comfortable enough for company. It is a journey designed to be shared between one soul and one God. When others walk away, when their voices fade, it is because God desires to draw you into deeper intimacy with Himself. He knows that if your heart depends on people for comfort, you will never learn the sweetness of His presence. So He allows separation, not to break you, but to bring you closer to Him. The lonely path is where your spiritual ears open, where your heart learns the sound of His whisper, and where your soul begins to find rest not in the world, but in the warmth of His nearness. There are moments when you will cry in the night and no one will come. There will be times when you long to explain your pain, but no one will understand. Yet in that silence, something divine happens. You begin to sense a peace that doesn't make sense, a strength that isn't your own, and a love that cannot be explained. That is God's quiet way of saying, I am here. He doesn't always announce his presence with thunder or vision. Sometimes he simply makes himself known through the calm that enters your spirit after you've wept. He is the unseen listener to every prayer, the invisible companion on every road, the gentle hand that steadies you when you think you can't take another step. Do not mistake the emptiness of people for the absence of God. Human hands may let go, but his hand never will. Human voices may go silent, but his word still speaks. When no one else understands, he does. When no one else cares to listen, he listens with perfect compassion. There is no path too dark, no valley too deep, no mountain too steep for his presence to follow. Even in your mistakes, even in your weakness, even in your doubt, he remains faithful. He does not walk with you because you are strong. He walks with you because he has chosen you, and his choice is eternal. The loneliness you feel is not a curse. It is a calling to deeper communion. In those moments when the world seems distant, heaven is drawing near. You will learn to walk with God not as a distant deity, but as your dearest friend. You will begin to speak to him in the stillness, and you will find that he answers not with words, but with peace. That peace becomes your proof. That quiet assurance becomes your confirmation. You will realize that you no longer need the crowd to validate your faith, because the presence of God himself becomes your confidence. So walk boldly on that lonely road. Lift your eyes even when the night is long, because the one who walks beside you neither sleeps nor slumbers. The world may not see him, but your heart knows he is there. Every step you take, he takes with you. Every tear you shed, he counts. Every fear you whisper, he hears. And one day, when you reach the end of this lonely path, you will look back and realize that you were never walking alone at all. You were walking with the one who carried you through every silent storm. You will see that what you thought was solitude was really sacred fellowship, the hidden company of God himself, who never left your side, not even for a moment. There will come a moment when the loneliness fades and the long night finally breaks into light. The tears that once fell quietly on your pillow will be replaced with gratitude, because you will understand what God was doing all along. Every unanswered prayer, every delayed promise, every season that felt like silence will begin to make sense. You will see that none of it was wasted. The pain was not pointless, the waiting was not empty, and the loneliness was never abandonment. It was divine preparation for the greatness he had written into your destiny. We often want God to move quickly, to speak clearly, to show us the next step right away, but he is not hurried because he sees what we cannot. He knows that if the blessing comes before the lesson, the blessing will destroy us, so he slows us down. He hides us away. He teaches us to depend on him when nothing else makes sense. The wilderness you are walking through is not a detour. It is the main road to your purpose. God does not waste a single tear or a single trial. Every part of your pain is a piece of his plan. So do not rush out of your wilderness. Do not try to escape the silence. Stay there until God says, "It is time," because the wilderness is where strength is born. It is where faith becomes unshakable. It is where character is built and humility is learned. You may feel unseen, but heaven sees you. You may feel forgotten, but heaven knows your name. You may feel small, but in God's eyes you are being shaped into something mighty. The very thing that feels like it is breaking you is actually building you. And when God finally brings you out, You will not be the same person who went in. You will walk differently, you will speak differently, you will love differently. The pain will have purified your heart, and the silence will have taught you to listen for God's whisper in ways you never could before. You will not need to prove anything to anyone, because your peace will speak for you. You will not need to chase validation, because you will have learned that the approval of heaven outweighs the applause of men. There will come a day when you look back on this lonely road with tears in your eyes, but they will not be tears of sorrow. They will be tears of gratitude. You will thank God for the nights that seemed endless because they made you stronger. You will thank Him for the people who left because their absence made space for His presence. You will thank Him for the prayers that seemed unanswered because what He gave you instead was far greater than what you asked for. You will realize that His silence was not rejection, it was strategy. His waiting was not punishment, it was mercy. His isolation was not cruelty, it was intimacy. Every chosen one must walk through a season where only God remains. It is the sacred path to divine purpose. Do not despise it, embrace it. Let it do its holy work within you. Because when the time comes for your revealing, when the appointed moment arrives, God will lift you before the world not because you are perfect, but because you were faithful when no one saw you. And when that day comes, you will smile through your tears and say, "Now I understand. Now I see why I had to walk alone, because in walking alone I learned to walk with God." So hold on, dear soul. The road may be quiet, but heaven is not silent. The path may be narrow, but it leads to glory. The season may be long, but it ends in promise. Do not give up in the silence. God is closer than you think. He is still writing your story, and the chapter you're in now is not the ending, it is the shaping. The loneliness you feel today is the birthplace of the destiny you will live tomorrow. And when your story is finally told, the world will see not how strong you were, but how faithful your God has always been. There comes a moment, often after the storm has passed and the silence has done its work, when you finally see what you could not see before. You realize that every step, every delay, every season of isolation was part of a divine orchestration that only heaven could compose. You understand now that what you thought was God's absence was actually His presence in disguise. He was not punishing you, He was preparing you. He was not ignoring you, He was guarding something precious inside you. He was not withholding, He was waiting until your heart was ready to receive what He had always planned to give. When you look back, you begin to see the fingerprints of God in every detail. The moments when you thought you were falling apart were the moments He was holding you together. The nights when you cried until you had no tears left were the nights He whispered strength into your soul. The doors that shut in your face were the very doors that would have led you away from your destiny. The people who left were the ones who could not walk where you were going. The disappointments that broke your heart were the very things that redirected your path to something greater. And now you see it, the loneliness was never wasted. It became the soil where your roots grew deep, the place where your faith became unshakable. In that solitude, God taught you things no sermon, no friend, no success ever could. He showed you the difference between being loved by people and being chosen by Him. He taught you to pray when no one was listening, to worship when no one was watching, to believe when there was no evidence. The silence became sacred because it was in the silence that you discovered the sound of His voice, soft, patient, unyielding in love. You understand now that walking alone was never a punishment but a privilege. Not everyone is called to that kind of journey. Only those who carry something eternal, something holy, something that will outlive them. God hides His most precious vessels not because they are weak, but because they are valuable. Diamonds are never found on the surface. They are formed deep underground in pressure and darkness. Gold is never pure when it is first found. It must pass through fire. So it is with the chosen. Your isolation was not evidence of rejection. It was evidence of worth. Heaven only invests silence in those whose future requires strength. And when you emerge from that season, you carry something the world cannot give and cannot take away. You walk with peace that cannot be shaken, with faith that cannot be explained, with a quiet confidence that can only come from knowing you were carried by unseen hands. You no longer need to prove your value or chase validation, because the one who shaped you in secret has already called you his own. You can stand in the light now, not as someone who survived loneliness, but as someone who was transformed by it. So yes, now you understand. You understand why some doors closed, why some people walked away, why some prayers were answered with silence. You understand that the loneliness that once crushed you was the very thing that carried you into intimacy with God. You understand that you had to walk alone because what God was building in you required stillness, patience, and separation. And you understand that even when it felt like you were alone, you never truly were. He was there in every moment, walking beside you, refining you, and whispering, "Trust me, I'm not finished yet." And now, as you stand on the other side of that journey, you can say with peace in your heart and strength in your voice, "I would not trade the loneliness for anything, because it was in that loneliness that I found God, and in finding Him, I found myself." There comes a sacred turning point when what once felt like pain begins to glow with purpose. You look back at the road behind you, the lonely miles, the sleepless nights, the silent prayers that seemed to go unanswered, and you realize that none of it was wasted. Every moment was a thread in the tapestry God was weaving, every delay a brushstroke in the masterpiece He was painting. You begin to see that your suffering was never random, your solitude was never meaningless. It was all preparation, careful, deliberate, holy preparation. The same tears that once blurred your vision now clear your sight. You see how the wilderness became your teacher, how the silence became your sanctuary. You understand that every heartbreak, every betrayal, every door that closed was actually heaven's way of guiding you to the path you were born to walk. The things that left you broken were the very things that made room for God to enter more deeply. The wounds that once hurt you became windows for His light to shine through. What once made you question His presence has now become the proof of His faithfulness. Now, as you stand on the other side of the storm, there is a stillness inside you, not the stillness of defeat, but the stillness of peace. You no longer rush to be seen, because you know the God who saw you in secret has already approved you. You no longer chase validation, because you've discovered the only voice that matters, the quiet whisper of the one who said, "You are mine." You no longer fear walking alone, because you have learned that the presence that walks beside you is enough. The solitude that once felt like suffering has become sacred. You've learned to find joy not in crowds, but in communion. You've learned to stand not in your strength, but in His, and now there is a different kind of fire burning within you, not the fire of pain, but the fire of purpose. You carry a quiet power born from everything you've endured. You speak differently because your words now come from depth, not from desire. You walk differently because your steps are guided by peace, not pressure. You love differently because your heart has been softened by grace. You have become living proof that what the enemy meant for harm, God turned into healing, that the seasons of silence were not empty, they were full of His unseen work. That the isolation that once felt unbearable was actually the womb of your transformation, and you realize something beautiful, that walking alone was never truly about the journey itself. It was about the encounter with God that changes everything, the encounter that strips away the false and reveals the eternal, the encounter that transforms a wounded soul into a vessel of glory. And when you've had that encounter, you can never walk the same again. You can never doubt His goodness again. You can never fear the silence again, because you now know that even in silence He speaks. So you stand now not as a victim of loneliness, but as a victor of purpose. You carry the fragrance of the wilderness, the strength of solitude, and the wisdom of waiting. You have learned that the chosen must walk alone so they can learn to walk with God. You have learned that isolation is not the absence of love, but the birthplace of it. And you have learned that every ending in God's hands is only the beginning of something far greater. Now your story is not one of loss, but of revelation. You walked alone and found divine companionship. You endured the fire and came out gold. You passed through the valley and discovered the shepherd was with you all along. And as you lift your eyes to heaven, you can finally say, not with sorrow, but with joy, now I understand. Every step, every tear, every silence was worth it, because through it all I found Him. And finding Him was the greatest blessing of all.